I don't think he will. I think he'd be crazy to do so. And I think
if he did.
I think what would happen is that he would immediately tender Russia's resignation from the club of civilized nations. It would be a total disaster for his country. So the current economic punishment that the West has been able to dish out would be massively intensified. Russia would be put into a kind of cryogenic economic freeze. And I think he would lose a lot of the kind of middle ground of global tacit acquiescence that he's had. I mean, if you look at sub-Saharan Africa, you look at Latin America, you look at Lula, for instance, who's just been elected again, look at South Asia. There's a lot of willingness to give Putin the benefit of the doubt. That will go the minute he does anything like that. He would also, crucially, I think, lose the patronage of the Chinese. And above all, in his own country, I think he would trigger an absolutely hysterical reaction.
Well, our Security and Defence Editor, Deborah Haynes, who will be right here this evening, is joining me now from Westminster. Deborah, what did you make of what Boris Johnson had to say?
Well, he speaks a lot of sense in terms of the catastrophic impact of Vladimir Putin choosing, if he did, to break the nuclear taboo and launch a nuclear weapon on Ukraine. He does underline that he doesn't think that Putin would do that, but the president has made no secret of the fact that he is a nuclear power, and concerns have been growing that, backed into a corner with his troops doing so badly on the ground, perhaps he would resort to a nuclear weapon. But as Boris Johnson said, the backlash from that would be huge, not just from allies such as China, but also those in-between countries that don't know whether they want to support Putin or not. And most of all, in terms of the Western nations, the Prime Minister the former Prime Minister, saying that that the West would have to retaliate, to respond, and it would take the war to a whole new deadly level.
And Deborah, is there any understanding at all of how the West would respond if, heaven forbid, that happened?
Most Western allies have been very careful to stick with this policy of deliberate ambiguity about how they would respond. They've said that there would be severe consequences. They've suggested that there could be some kind of physical response, which would potentially involve military troops, NATO troops perhaps responding. France, however, is a bit of an outlier. Remember, it's one of the three NATO powers that has nuclear weapons. The French nuclear weapons aren't part of the French nuclear deterrence. It's an independent nuclear arsenal. But the French president has recently said quite clearly that were Vladimir Putin to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine or in the region, then France would not retaliate with its nuclear weapons. Obviously, nobody wants to talk about the potential for a direct nuclear retaliation, but clearly setting a red line like that is perhaps not helpful, given that the rest of his allies, the UK and the US, have deliberately not said how they would or would not respond specifically.